Good evening and welcome to the 2018-2019 Supper Club year and video series. We are so glad that you are part of the Supper Clubs and that we get to be part of your Supper Clubs as well. Exciting, we have 40 Supper Clubs this year. We have about 320 people involved. And what's really cool is we have 10 new groups, completely new folks who have never done a supper club. 10, that's great.
Hi, new people.
So welcome. So this year we decided to take on the theme of spiritual practices, of living the spiritual life through practicing the spiritual life and doing spiritual disciplines.
It's a little different, a little more practical maybe. You'll get homework, we'll practice together, so kind of cool. But we're going to start a little more broadly with that word spirituality. So what's it like? What does it mean to live a spiritual life? In what way is that different? So I'm going to ask you. What does it mean to live a spiritual life as opposed to a secular life, or however what other word we might, what's different about it?
So when I think of the spiritual life, let me go, we haven't scripted this part. I think about living with a deeper awareness of something beyond me, that something is going on beyond me, beyond us, and the spiritual life is trying to connect into what I would call the God life, connect into the God life, the life of deeper meaning and awareness. And I think the spiritual practices then help us foster and cultivate a way in, a way of growing our awareness of God around us.
Yeah, you're making me think that, because when I thought about it, I think about whether there's a different set of values that we're kind of taught in our faith tradition, right? But you're talking about more of that actual direct experience of the holy in the moment, which also informs your choices, just like your values that you've been taught in a different value set.
Right.
But you're talking about that really living experience of the holy, which is, I think so too. And what I was thinking around values is about, sometimes they're certainly countercultural and often counterintuitive. Some of this, so giving your life away, Jesus is, if you want to save your life, you're going to lose it. And what does that mean? And so I think in our culture, really, what does that mean? And the sense of sacrifice, the sense of hospitality, generosity, at a level that I don't think we're taught in the culture.
Right.
And care for others, and particularly those who are hurting. We take these seriously, and that changes the choices we make, as well, the values that we hold.
Right. Well, we live in such an individualistic and this rugged individualism in a capitalist culture, but we say in Christianity, we say we serve a God who says you live your life by giving it away. It's totally counterintuitive and radical. But how do we foster a way to transform ourselves from the world's culture to the spiritual culture?
Which is where the practices so often come in, because it's hard, right? It's hard to do this.
Discipline.
It's hard to live in the world differently, so to have disciplines. So each month we'll give you a new spiritual discipline, and you can practice it and go back and talk about it with others. We talked about why now? Like, why are we doing this? Why do we think it's important to talk about spiritual disciplines in this time in our country?
Well, I think, at some very practical level, this culture has heated up, or particularly the United States. There's so much vitriol in the vernacular and the way that we talk to each other, that there's hostility and anger and distrust, and we aren't supposed to live like that, both for our own health or the health of the community. So learning how to become grounded and rooted and recentered so we don't live in fear and distrust and anger. Man, we just need it. We need practices to regroup, right? To recenter.
That's right. That's right. We had talked about the benefits of spiritual practices, there's moving closer to God. There's, but there's also there's getting to know yourself better, just be more self-awareness, right? So you're going to be a little more, you're going to catch yourself before this is me about to go off the deep end with my kids and catching myself, which gets to the third one. It's a very practical application of spiritual practices, is that you're going to have better relationships. So there's a practical side to this.
Right.
And as you say, now more than ever, we need some tools that are going to ground us in something. I think ground us in something bigger than the narrative, the soap opera that is so much of our culture right now. I find it when I'm doing my spiritual practices, I've got so many things swirling about, and I'm feeling so much around politics or whatever, and I go sit and I go, oh yeah, there's a whole world that's bigger than all of that, right? And okay, now go back and do your best in that world from this place, right? That's what it does.
I think also our tradition, particularly the Protestant tradition, we haven't really schooled people well in spiritual practices, and we don't start out of the gate by saying, hey, you should be praying, or maybe we should just rephrase that. You could be praying. You could be doing these things that are life-giving. Not because you have to do them, but they're life-giving, that are recentering, and that the Christian tradition actually has practices that have gone on for 2,000 years. We have something to offer, but it's almost like we've kept that a secret. And people want it; they are longing for it.
Right.
And
maybe at different times in history, more than others, that we've kind of suppressed that or not. And as you say, we're hungry for it.
And people are hungry for it.
Yeah. I remember when we were talking, there was a sense, realizing that there's a wildness to, if we're going to invite God, that direct awareness of God, that's something you can't control, it's something the church can't control, and there's a wildness to a trust that something, so new things can happen, right? We're talking about transforming ourselves. That means change. That means your relationship with your spouse is going to change, or the kids, and that feels scary. So I think spiritual practices are dangerous, right? In that good way.
You're opening yourself up for transformation.
Yeah. So.
Well, then that's great.
I know. Let's do it. Should we define what we're going to define?
So we're going to work with a definition of spiritual practices that we use in the Faith Leader program, which is a 7-month faith formation program. And what we mean by spiritual practices are the habits and activities of heart, mind, and body through which one lives out the depth relationship to God, self, and others. So habits and activities that through heart, mind, and body that deepens our relationship with God and self and others. Right? Does that make sense? So it's the and so we're going to explore in the next 6 months. This is 6 months, different habits and activities that can help foster that depth
dimension. I think it's hard to people say, well, what are you talking about? There's a mystery to this, and I think that gets at it, that sense of depth, and the whole person. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's not just a body exercise.
Right.
It's there's a holistic element to it that's powerful.
Yeah, we're getting out of our heads.
Right.
It's not about belief.
Yeah.
I believe that,
Right.
but it's
That's right.
doing, being part of it. Okay.
Okay. Where do you want to go?
Well, there are 6
Yep,
streams. So there are 6, we call streams, 6 streams within the history of Christianity that express different aspects of the faith. So we're going to focus on these different streams. I'm just going to name them.
Okay.
All right. The practice of prayer will be one of them. Prayer and various forms of prayer. The practice of personal integrity. The practice of the presence of the Spirit. The practice of community. The practice of the Word, as in the Scriptures. And the practice of faithful living. Now, those aren't self-obvious what the definitions are, but we're going to take one each month and unpack it, and then give you homework to try one for a month and see how that works. But for tonight,
We're
there's some
gonna-
questions.
Yeah.
Right?
We thought we'd just start with, where have you been in your spiritual life? Where are you now? Where would you like to go? Kind of questions. So we're hoping you'll have a good conversation about your own spiritual life, and maybe look back 5 years. Where were you 5 years ago? Did you have some practices? Were they helpful? Has that changed over time? And where are you today? Do you feel spiritually dry, or is this a really rich time for you?
Or is the word spirituality just kind of freak you out and it's not something you feel comfortable using?
Right.
But we're going to invite you to hang in there.
In fact, that's a good reminder that this is a guilt-free zone. Sometimes there's a sense in which, especially with things like prayer, that you should be doing, this, praying or what have you. Let that go. We're all coming from different life experiences and where we are. So let the conversation be a really judgment-free, guilt-free kind of place. And then to maybe talk about where you'd like to go. Is there a certain kind of practice that you'd like to incorporate?
Interested, yeah.
Just have some conversation, and then next month you can get back together and maybe try something this month.
I think one thing we can guarantee is if you take these seriously and practice the practices that we'll teach you, you will be different. There's almost no way that you won't be more aware of God in your life and around you, that your relationships won't reflect some sort of growth, and that you won't become more aware of what's going on in your own life if you practice some of these practices. So I think
That's
it's
right.
good. We'd love to hear back from you if along the journey you're feeling, good things or have thoughts about what is happening. Just email us. We'd love to hear from you. Sometimes we do these videos and we don't know. Or if you're watching them, we don't know.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Good. Have
All right.
fun. All right. See you in a month.
Good night.